Hi everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be using the September 2019 card kit and this beautiful stamp set that's in it that's called Look for the Rainbows. Beautiful large flowers in there. And there's also a set of pattern papers in the kit, and there's gorgeous patterns, so colorful, lots and lots of rainbow patterns. And I'm going to use just one of these today. I'm going to use that one that's on top that kind of has that kind of sun ray pattern, but all rainbow colors. I think this can look really, really neat. I'm going to start out by stamping the really large blossom, 2 leaves and a stem. I think this is a magnolia flower. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to be painting it today as if it is a white magnolia flower. So I stamped it twice, so I have a really solid line, and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink because it's waterproof, and I'm stamping it onto Strathmore 500 series watercolor paper. So I'm going to be painting it with 5 different colors of distress ink. I'm using pumice stone, shaded lilac, mustard seed, crushed olive, and forest moss. And I'm using very, very pale shades for the flower, and then I'll use some more intense colors for the center of the flower and the leaves and stem. Smushing those ink pads onto a Art Impressions palette off to the side, and then picking up the color with the number 2 round brush from Royal and Langnickel. This is from their Zen series of brushes. So like I mentioned before, I'm keeping the flower very, very pale. I'm painting it so that it looks like it's a white flower. And even though white flowers are technically white, when you look at them or at photographs of flowers, they will have some shading on the interior of the flower and onto the petals. So in order to shade that for a white flower, you just have to add a little bit of shadow right at the interior where the petals meet the center, and also wherever there's an overlap of petals. So I'm adding a little bit of shaded lilac in those areas and then going over with some pumice stone just to give it a little bit of depth. I want to make sure that I leave the majority of each petal completely white because I do want it to still look like a white magnolia flower. So I'm going to paint the center of the flower. I'm going to give it a little bit of a yellow shade with that mustard seed, but it was really, really bright. So I tried to tone it back by adding some pumice stone on top. And then eventually I added some pine needles, or not pine needles, but forest moss, that darkest green shade that I'll be using on the leaves and stem. So I did a couple layers of color just to intensify that shading on the interior of the flower. Wanted to make sure I had enough shading so it still looked like a white flower, but not so much shading that it started to look like a gray flower. I used the crushed olive on the leaves and stem, and then added a bit more shading with forest moss. This is just going to give it a very toned look, and I like how it kind of goes into play with the flower. So I added that forest moss on the flower, and then I fussy cut all of these out. So I'm cutting them right up against that black line. And when it comes to the 2 leaves, it has that little itty bitty stem, and I wanted to include it on my card. So instead of cutting right up next to that line, I left a little bit of a white border around it. And I'll go back in later and add a black marker over the top, and you won't even know that I made the stem of these leaves a little bit thicker. So I did that for both leaves. I wanted to make sure that I had enough stem to work with. And then I cut out the large flower right around the edge. And then I took a black marker. This is a Memento Tuxedo black marker. You could use whatever black marker you need for this because it doesn't need to be special or waterproof or anything, since we're not going to be adding anything on top of this painting anymore. So the stems, I just colored in black over that entire area just to finish off each stem and to give it more thickness so it was easier to work with. So super easy, nice little hack to get those really small stems on my leaves. So now I'm going to go ahead and work with the pattern paper. I really love how this sun ray pattern kind of leads the eye all to the center. And so I thought I'd place my flower right there. And I wanted to make sure that it was positioned just right on my A2 size card. So I'm using the Waffle Flower A2 layer dies, and this is going to give me a great method of positioning everything just right. I love doing things like this. So I'm using a bit of washi tape just to hold that die in place, and I'll run that piece of pattern paper through my die cutting machine. Then I positioned the flower and stem over this piece of pattern paper, and I brought in a ruler. From the very beginning, I wanted to have a diagonal cut of this pattern paper, so I'm just figuring out which way I want that line to go. And then I'm going to move that stem and then come in with a craft knife. And I'm just going to gently cut this. I'm going to go over it a couple times so that it cuts through the entire piece of paper. This is going to give me a nice dynamic line on my finished card. Took some black cardstock and prepped it with an anti-static powder tool. And then I stamped one of the greetings from the stamp set in Versamark ink. This is a very sticky ink. It's perfect for embossing powder. So I dipped my cardstock piece into some Brutus Monroe Alabaster embossing powder, tapped off the excess, and then I used a heat tool to heat this until it was smooth and melted. I then used my fingertips to wipe off any of that powder that was staying on the cardstock. And then I used my craft knife and ruler once again and trimmed out this very, very narrow greeting. Used my scissors just to snip off the end. And then it was time to assemble my card. I'm using some white cardstock today that's scored at 5.5 to create a top folding card. I then used a Xyron Mega Runner adhesive to adhere my pattern paper to the front of the card. I'm going to take the flower and it's going to be placed over that area in the center of that pattern. So I want to make sure the stem leads up to the flower. So I took some Gina K Connect glue, put it on the back of that stem, and placed it on my card, and then I used a block to hold it down while it dried. Then took some 3D foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesives, put it on the back of this large flower, and then placed it right over the top with perfect positioning for where that stem is. So now I'm going to work on the leaves, and when it comes to adhering these leaves, I found a really good method to do this. I put a little bit of glue on the back, and this first one, I didn't have my camera on, so you didn't see it, but I'll show it with the second leaf. I kind of placed it where I wanted it, and then I took my scissors, and following the angle of the stem, I just snipped a little bit off so that I could butt that leaf right up against the edge of that stem, and it looks like it's all one piece. So it's the perfect angle, and it just lines up right with that stem. I love how that turned out. So now I'm going to adhere the greeting. I've got some really narrow foam tape from Darice on the back of this black greeting. Put that right over the top of that stem with a gap for where the stem was. And then I took a 0.1 Copic multiliner pen. You could use any black pen. And I just added a very thin dash line right below that diagonal line of pattern paper. To finish it off, I added a bit of shimmer with a Wink of Stella clear glitter pen. And that's the card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick card idea. If you would like to pick up the September 2019 card kit from Simon, I have links down below in the video description and also in the supply section over at my blog. Once again, thank you so much for watching today's video. I love doing videos like this for you guys, and I've got 3 more card videos for you to check out on screen right now. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also hit that notification bell so you never miss a video again. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.